That's because we really do. Good morning, everybody. Bella Vista. We've got something new today for you. Mayor and I have decided that it might be fun to have an audience. So, guess what? Today we have an audience, and we're going to be doing some interacting with them. Thank you all for showing up.
Indeed.
We really appreciate it. We didn't tell you we were actually going to be on the set because we wanted you to show up. Okay? All right, but seriously now, you want to just say hey and give us a little bit of what you've been doing over the last month that that you can talk about?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, one and all. Welcome back. This has been an interesting month. You've heard me talk about more and more capital projects coming into play. One of the projects that is now beginning to come together is the fire training tower. And that whole training facility, if you remember, we were going to have it down on the southwest side, and then we had $700,000 worth of drainage problems, which was too much money, so we said pass on that land, and then we started to look for other pieces of land. And we settled on a piece of property that Cooper has up near the recycling center, excuse me, not the recycling center, the transfer station for Republic and the animal shelter. And the reason for putting it up there is, although it will not generate a lot of smoke because we don't use wood to burn on the tower, it's actually gas. We felt that it's probably best to keep it away from neighboring houses and whatnot. So we negotiated with Cooper and we have agreed, council has agreed to purchase the land. And yesterday, the CEO of Cooper and myself both signed off on the purchase agreement. And so we're now well on our way to purchasing the property, and we can now get the engineers in there. The one additional cost that we didn't have so much on the other locations was we actually have to build a road in from 71. It's no big deal, but it's just something that has to be done. So I'm excited about that. This is the easiest of the 3 bond projects to build. And so I'm excited that we can get it, I hope, built by the end of the year and into service.
You know what I liked? There was some extra stuff that happened with that purchase and with Cooper. The animal shelter is getting more land.
They are. That was a very nice side item for the animal shelter to have that extra land so they can expand in the future as well.
Yes.
You're right. We've also been working on the expansion of the Mercy Way Bridge, and I suspect there might be some questions coming from the audience later about it. But we did have a groundbreaking on the 31st of March on a very cold, blustery day. But it too was the culmination of 8 years of planning. And so it's nice to see that coming into the picture as well. The trails are moving along nicely. We have a new restaurant coming in where the Legion is now located. It's called Shredders, and for those of you that don't mountain bike, when you're mountain biking, your tires tend to shred on the rocks, and that's why it's called Shredders. And so they're making some internal changes. I don't think it'll have to be a large-scale development that has to go to City Council. I think it can be done with the Planning Commission, because they're not moving walls, they're not changing the footprint, which is actually good because it's a great building, it's not that old. And so I'm excited about that as well. So yeah. It just keeps on moving, and of course our new residential housing permits. At the end of March, we were 6 ahead of where we were last year.
Yeah.
So it's slowed down a bit. It's all relative, of course.
That's right, that's right. You know, somebody that I was really excited to hear speak the other day at the work session, and that's your new trail person.
Yes.
Emily?
Emily came to us from Idaho, where she had a similar job, and she also has a master's in planning. And that has been a godsend as well, so she can take a lot of the planning that surrounds trails, and we don't have to burden it on the other planners. She can actually do it. She knows how to do it. She gave an excellent presentation to council at the work session on what she does and what she has accomplished over the last 9 months. And we're so lucky to have her. We really, really are. She was an excellent find for Bella Vista, and she's very happy, loves it here, loves getting on her bicycle and going out on the trails. And yeah, great catch.
You ready for some questions?
I am, or do you want me to talk about what a mayor should be doing since we're going into a new mayoral thing?
We can do that because there may be some questions about that. Yeah, so you're unfortunately leaving us,
I am.
but I mean...
Maybe.
Maybe?
Not as mayor, but...
Oh, okay. Yes, yes. There was hope.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, seriously, I think it would be not only for anybody that hasn't signed up yet,
Sure.
or anybody that has signed up, what qualities, what do you need? What have you learned? Not to run? Is that what you've learned?
Yeah. I've learned not to run from issues, yeah. But I didn't do that in the corporate world either. If you see an 800 gorilla in the room, you call out the 800-pound gorilla. You don't hope it's going to go away. You know, when I first started to look at it in early 2014, I approached it from a business perspective because that's what I've done all my life. And I realized that Bella Vista really didn't have a vision. And I could see a few things that were obvious. Our older population was declining in number. Some of the younger families were coming in, but there was really nothing as we have seen now. Golf was on the downswing. We needed to find an alternative activity that was going to generate both revenue for the POA and ourselves, but also to bring in more people. And from that, I started to formulate a vision, because I think that's the first thing you've got to do is look out the next 5 to 10 years. What do you think Bella Vista might look like? Recognizing that your vision has to fluctuate. It has to change as you know, conditions arise. And so I came up with the vision that I wanted Bella Vista to be the premier destination for people to live and to come and play. And at the same time, I had discussions with the Walton Family Foundation. In fact, they were miles ahead in planning trails up here, but they hadn't actually put it into motion yet. And one of the stumbling blocks, of course, was how do you get trails on the POA land, which is supposed to be only for POA people, and we solved that through a license agreement. But we needed to make sure that the property values did not decline, because most of us have a house which is our #1 asset, and when we pass away, we'd like to leave something for the kids and the grandkids, and I just couldn't, in my heart of hearts, let that happen. So in order to do that, then you have to attract more people in, you have to create a lot of buzz in the community, but at the same time, you know, you hear about cultural diversity and everything else, and usually it means something different, but up here, our challenge has been the integration of the original folks that moved here as they age and the young families coming in. How do you get them to do this? And I first saw the achievement of that. Remember when the POA turned, what was it, 50 a few years ago?
We're turning 50 next year.
No, I think it was 1965 to 2015.
I'm thinking of Reardon Hall.
Oh, yeah. And there was a dance in the parking lot over at Tanyard Creek. And there was a great band playing. And, you know, the older folks like me were sitting over there, and the younger families are over here. And I thought, that's an interesting dynamic. I wonder if something's going to happen. And by golly, some of the older folks stood up and came over and asked the parents if they could dance with their grandchildren.
Aww.
And I knew at that point, okay, it's starting. And then the trails brought even more, because they're not just for biking, they're for hiking and even just plain old walking. And when I go on the trails, I often see families together, especially around things like Easter and Christmas and whatnot, when families coming together, and they're all out there, and the youngsters are buzzing around, you know, exploring everything, and the older and the middle age are just taking their time, and they're catching up on things they haven't talked about for months and months. And that's a really good feeling.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, we began to see more and more people coming here. Now, I'd like to say that my vision was so attractive that that's probably what did it, but in reality, what was happening is the cities south of us were pricing themselves out of the market for young families. The average price of a home just off the square in Bentonville is over $1 million. When I first got here, it was about $400,000. That was in 2010. And I meet with the superintendent of the school systems all the time, and I was talking to Dr. Jones, maybe a year ago. She and I talk more frequently, but a year ago she said to me, for the first time in living memory, Thomas Jefferson and Little Sugar, which are two elementary schools down off Tiger Boulevard that take the spillover from our Cooper school, she said, we have spare capacity. And the reason is the young families are not moving into the downtown core of Bentonville. And so they've had to adjust as well. But as a result of those higher prices, now people are coming here. On top of that, we've seen a change in the mix of new residents coming here. Some of you have participated in the meet and greet that Tom Judson and I co-host on a quarterly basis. We first started that, Debbie was the key pin behind it, maybe 2017. Tom had been here about a year at that point. Mm-hmm. The first one we had 10 people, and now they're up to 60 to 70 people. And it amazes me over those years when we say, well, where are you from? We used to go around the room, but there are so many people now, it takes too long. So it's just a show of hands if you're from. California and Texas has really boomed here. And I think a lot of it has to do with California. The market's still fairly high. There's everything from pollution to a lot of people to you name it. And when they can come and live in a forest and have the beauty surrounding them, they love it. And they can usually come and pay cash for a house because they can get a very nice settlement for their house. That's understandable. The same thing for the folks from Texas. It's interesting when you look at the census, this 2020 census, we have seen an influx of people into Northwest Arkansas. If you look down in the Delta and in the South, they're in trouble. People are leaving in droves because there's no jobs, there's no manufacturing. So we're very blessed to be up in the Northwest. But as I look into the broader scheme of things for possibly my next job,
Yes.
I've also got to look at a total state, and I am concerned with what's happening down there. So once you've got the vision, and you feel pretty good about it, then you have to test it. So you talk to people. At the same time, you have to start attending every single council meeting, committee meeting, commission meeting that you can get your hands on, because you have to understand how it works.
And I think you need to also be in very close touch. Go to those meetings for the POA because that's that three-legged stool.
And you're
you
right.
You have to understand all of it.
And the three-legged stool that she's alluding to is the city, the POA, and Cooper. And
ACC.
but even Cooper itself.
Yes.
You know. And so yeah, you go to all the POA meetings that you possibly can as well. Then you have to go down and you've got to talk to the executive team at Cooper. And you have to explain your vision and what you want to try and accomplish over the next 4 years. And that's what I did. I went down and spoke to John Cooper. He's no longer the CEO, it's Kent Berger. And to Neff Basur, who's the executive vice president, et cetera. And explained what I wanted to do. And they thought it was pretty good. Mm-hmm. And so I stay in touch with them. Do we always agree on everything? No. Do Tom and I always agree on everything? No. But all of us realize that we can't let a leg on that stool collapse because then the whole thing falls. So yes, you have to be very, very cognizant of that. A finance background really helps, which I have.
Yes.
And a technology background helps, which again I have. Finance, because there are ways of doing financing that you don't hurt your balance sheet, and yet you still can get stuff done. And you have to understand short-term debt versus long-term debt, and what are the loans available on the short-term side that are very attractive and low interest that you can take advantage of, which I've used a number of times to buy everything from police cars to financing half of I still call it the new work center that we have for the public works folks, to fire engines. Fire engines are $460,000 a piece. You just don't reach into your capital and say, oh, there it is. But if you understand how money flows and the market works, then you can do it. And then the culmination that I'm extremely pleased of was we floated our first bond. And that was $24.3 million for 3 large projects that needed to be done, because we need to stay ahead of the growth. And I've said this time and time again, we cannot let the growth manage us. If you do, you're going to find yourself like some of our sister cities in the area who are scrambling. And once you let the growth start managing you, it's very, very hard to turn that around, because I've seen it in the corporate world as well.
Do you need municipal experience?
No, no. I'm sure it would help, but I caught on quite quickly because, you've got a board of directors, and I've sat on numerous boards. I still do in the area. I'm chairman of the Northwest Hospital System. And once you've got that experience under your belt, you begin to understand the ebb flow, the importance of volunteers, how it all works on the corporate side. I had a good feel for that, of course, because that's the world from whence I came. But no, I don't think you need municipal experience. I suppose you could say maybe it's good you don't have it, because then you're not bringing any baggage along with you either.
There's always that.
Yeah. But if you have the municipal experience in the city in which you're running for mayor, absolutely.
That was my point.
That's a plus.
Yeah.
You also cannot be running for mayor because you have some sort of personal grudge that you want to settle. The city did this to me, so by golly, I'm going to become mayor and fix it. You have to look at the whole city and what is best for it, what's best to keep us moving forward. If you focus on just a couple of incidents because 2 or 3 people are upset about it, try and find a solution for them, but don't change all the laws and everything else, because you'll spend too much time doing that and not be able to address other things that need to be done in order to stay ahead of the curve. So
what I'm hearing you say, and I've seen you do, is that relationship you have is way beyond Bella Vista. I mean, you meet regularly with other mayors.
Oh, all the time.
And the county.
Yes.
And the judge. I mean, it's important to not just be isolated, correct?
That's true. That's true. I just resigned as the chairman of the Benton County it's a long one. Benton County Judicial Committee. There's more in there, but and the reason is because I'm going to be phasing out as mayor. If I get this other job, then I won't be able to focus on it. So I thought the earlier I get out, the better we can get somebody to come in. Basically, that is looking at what are we going to do about the jail, and it needs to be completely revamped. It was built in '97 to hold 669 people. The daily census now is over 700. They're having problems with sleeping quarters. Plus, times have changed. We need to be able to address behavioral health. Someone who has a behavioral health issue is not serviced properly by the police simply taking them down to the county jail. That's not going to work, and I think everybody agrees with that. So you have to have the facilities available to try and accommodate and help. you have to stop recidivism, which is people being released from jail and then within 3 months they're back in jail again. So should we be teaching them a trade? And I think the answer is yes, because if you look around these days in the school systems, when we went to school, it used to be arts, secretarial, and trade. And it's changed a lot, obviously. The trades are gone. And I think we need to take every advantage we can so that we can get good tradespeople back, plus software people.
Yes. And hardware.
Yep, there's a big gap right now.
Yep.
I was talking to a CEO of a tech firm in Bentonville a couple of weeks ago, and he's got a long list of people that he'd love to hire, but they're not here. And he believes, because some of them are junior positions, if he could get that gap of graduates from high school that didn't go to college who might be flipping burgers, interested and trained, then he would have a workforce that he and the other tech companies could actually dip into. So that's something I'd like to explore as well. But you're right, you have to expand your vision, you have to get involved in the community, you have to understand what other communities are doing so you're all in step. It's now a monthly Zoom meeting with all the mayors that wish to attend. We had it weekly during COVID, so we could all say, okay, well, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm seeing, you know, and there was a lot of collaboration that went back and forth, which was great. I wish I'd thought of it, but Mayor Orman in Bentonville actually floated the idea, and everybody said, this is a great thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you just can't live in your own little bubble.
Right.
For sure.
You ready for some questions from our wonderful audience?
Yeah, okay, here we go.
Get the tomatoes ready. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, who would like to go first? This is your opportunity.
It's our opportunity. That's right. I'll go first. Okay. I have a question about the bank building here on the Four Corners.
Yes.
There's a lot of people talking on the internet about what's going on there. Do you have any idea what's going to happen with that?
I can tell you what I know. It's owned by a gentleman from Israel. He actually owns the land where Goodwill is as well. And he and his dad were the main developers behind the Vatican years ago. And ironically, on Easter Sunday, he was here in town and we had breakfast together. And we were talking about that building because we've been trying to find a business that would go into it. One of the problems is, of course, it's a bank and there's a vault. And if you know how banks are built, they built the vault first and then build the bank around the vault. And when they're going to demolish, they demolish everything around the vault and the vault gets demolished last. So you can't just take it out of the picture. We've tried to get pharmacies, we've looked at restaurants, any number of things. He recently had a bit of a black mold problem in there. That's all been repaired and fixed. And it's about 5,000 square feet and 1,800 of it is on the right side as you face it, and it's pretty well separated from what used to be the bank portion. And there's an accounting firm that's going in there now. So you'll start to see, in fact, I drove by it yesterday, and you can see that there were work people in there and they're hauling stuff out and bringing new stuff in. I don't know when it's going to open, but I'm glad that at last we're finally getting something into the building. The rest of the building, it's still up for grabs. I still think a pharmacy would be ideal there because it's got a drive-through. There's no pharmacy up here at all for the people on the west side. We've tried to entice the pharmacies, and so far we haven't had any takers. There's not enough parking for restaurants. That's one of the problems. But with the pharmacy, especially with the drive-through and the vault, it seems like a good match. Just got to find the person who wants to match. You know, one of the problems we have with all that land is the traffic count. I realize that the people on the west side for years have been chomping at the bit to have a grocery store. And it would be ideal to put it where the craft fair is, because the craft fair is no longer, unfortunately. And the problem is you have to have daily count of 15,000 cars or more, both ways, total. and we're up to about 6, even with the bypass. Prior to the bypass, we were down about 1,000. But at least it's picked up, but it hasn't picked up enough. And so the larger enterprises like grocery stores, pharmacies, that type of thing, really have no interest. So, but it's a good question. It's been
Very
sitting
good
there a long
question.
time.
Yeah, yeah. Next. Come on, somebody.
Here we go.
Actually, I have 2 questions.
Sure.
And the first one might be easier. My dad lives in Concordia.
Yes.
So with the capital improvements on Lancashire, what are they exactly doing with the bridge that crosses Little Sugar, then on down? When do they expect this to be finished?
But they're actually going to build a moat all the way around Concordia, so that I'm just teasing. Those are 2 capital projects by RDOT, which is Arkansas Department of Transport. And, but we've been involved since the beginning, and the Walton Family Foundation has been involved as well, because on both bridges, there are going to be bicycle lanes. But on the first one down around Tanyard Creek, that old bridge was in trouble. There was, a lot of people call it a sinkhole. I think of a sinkhole as huge. But it was big enough that if your car hit it, you were in serious damage. So they came out and they fixed it. But it needed to be replaced because of the flooding. We've seen more flooding over the past probably 8 years than we've seen in a long time. And of course, the flooding and the water does a wonderful job at eroding and moving things, so that bridge had to go. So what they're doing is they're putting in very deep footings. You've probably seen them do the boring, and the bridge will be twice as long as the original bridge. And they have encountered some problems, as we all have, with supply chain. They've shortage of concrete, shortage of drivers to drive concrete trucks, some steel problems, but they're finally getting through it. They had originally said it would be open this spring. Now they're saying late summer. So it'll open, and that detour that they built will be all taken out entirely. And you know, the road will go back and look exactly as it did before. The other bridge over by City Hall is going to be expanded to 4 lanes and a bike bridge. It may move slightly, but not very much. I was hoping they were going to take out some of that big curve with the mountain. There are no plans at this point to do that, unfortunately. But it will be better than it was, because that bridge was falling apart too underneath that you couldn't see. And they had originally said summer of next year. I'd be willing to bet it's probably closer to the end of next year, but they haven't come out with a guess yet. Question number 2.
Hey, has to do with Cooper.
Yep.
A lot of people I play golf with, they talk about Cooper. What is their role exactly? And I was told that they still own a lot of property up here. So for each parcel, they have a vote, so they could outvote everybody. True, and would you
No, that's
extend
not
this?
quite the way it's set up. First of all, yes, they have a lot of land up here. Most of the flat land that you see, not including the southern portion down where the food trucks are, but up in what was the original village, all the flat land is still owned by Cooper. So the craft fair down in the corner of 340 and Rogers, they are not builders anymore and developers. Their focus is to sell the land. So case in point, the land that was open and available below the country club on Dogwood, they went through the large-scale development process, which was to plat it all out. It was done by something called a PZD, which lets everybody see exactly what it's going to look like before everything is in. They had to put proper curb and gutter, but then they subbed out the actual building to a private company, because they're not in the building business at all. As far as voting, the way that it's set up is that all of us that own property are Class A shares. Cooper has a set number of Class B shares, not based so much on their land, it's just a set number, and it's a lot smaller. Class A shares, it's everybody who owns land, not just people who own homes on land. And all their lots are sold, so that'd be about 32,000. They hold, I think the Class B shares are somewhere under 3,000. The way that they can trump is, let's say the POA wants to sell something, a piece of land or whatever. Excuse me, the declaration and the covenants are pretty clear that you need 2/3 of the landowners to approve. Then you need Cooper to approve with the Class B shares. If they get the 2/3, but Cooper doesn't think it's a good idea, they can veto everything, all the vote of the Class A, and they still hold the cards. So that's as far as land is concerned. Then there's the water, okay? And the POA is one of 4 water systems inside the city. It is by far the largest. And the POA owns the infrastructure, the pipes, and they own the water, which they purchase for the most part from Bentonville. They purchase a little bit on the west side from Two Ton out of Centerton. And they do not own the right to say who gets the water. Cooper still retains that. So, for example, we have islands, there's about 7 of them, inside the city, which are surrounded by POA properties and owners, but they do not belong to the POA. And
It's crazy.
that's usually because way back in the 1960s, when the first John Cooper came in, they decided not to sell to him. And so they have kept that land separate outside the POA, but they are in the city. So they're usually on wells because they would find it very difficult from Cooper to be able to get water unless they would agree to come into the declaration and then become part of the POA. And whether they'd like to do it or not, that's a personal decision. But those islands still exist. So,
Unless we have another burning question, we can take probably one more. But this is great. I
Yep.
love having this audience. You guys need to bring more friends in and come back with your questions.
We've talked in the past about the entrance into Bella Vista,
yes,
Lake Bella Vista,
yes.
the area where the food trucks are, and are there any updates to the negotiations of that Lake Bella Vista area
Okay.
to improve it?
Let me talk about the food truck area first. That area, I guess it's probably the worst kept secret, is the Waltons. They have purchased that land. They have a vision. They had a vision for us and helped us on the trails. I'm sure it's going to be more outdoor activity, and in my discussions with them, I think it'll be very tastefully done. What are they going to do? I don't know. It's probably best I don't know because I'm subject to freedom of information, and they're aware of that. But Tom and Stuart are great guys, and they will do a very nice job. Lake Bella Vista is an eyesore. Yes. And that's probably putting it mildly. And it's not part of Bella Vista. There's a long story behind it. The city didn't exist when the transfer of land actually occurred and Bentonville took over. The irony is in 2014, I met with the mayor of Bentonville, who I knew from my corporate days, and I was running for mayor here, and I said, so how much do you want for the lake? And he said, it's not for sale. We've put far too much money into the infrastructure around it and the trails. I said, fine. 2018 comes around, and of course, it's all smashed to bits. And a bunch of mayors are standing around one day, and one of them says, so, Bob, how goes it in Bentonville? And he looked, and he said, I'm trying to convince Christie to buy a lake. So, so you know, it kind of just turned the other way. it's a very sad state of affairs. It's probably going to end up in the Supreme Court. There was FEMA money and there was Walton money to actually put together a free flow stream and take out the dam, but to have a small lake off to the side. And the Cooper corporate lawyers came in and said, no, you can't do that because there's an original agreement between us and Trailblazers that carried into the city, we believe, that says you must restore the dam back to its original state in the event of any catastrophic event. So Bentonville contended that they did not have to do that. It went to court. The judge agreed. Cooper Communities countered and took it to appeals, and they won the appeal. And it remains to be seen. I suppose Bentonville now has the opportunity, if they so desire, to take it to the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, what happens, it continues to erode more and more. You may have read in the papers a few months ago that their city council actually obligated over $500,000 to fix that berm, but they cannot touch it until the courts have made the final decision as to who owns what and can do what. So it just sits there, and it's not a pretty sight at all. And I hate having "Welcome to Bella Vista" sign right there. And we don't even own all the land around it. When Bentonville did their strip annexation years ago at the turn of the century, they left a little bit all around the sign so that they could say it was in Bella Vista, and that's it.
Flip, you have a question?
Well, it was, I know the old theater came down.
Yes.
And I was just curious about what that land, what's going to be developed there, because that's another little eyesore there.
It is. And again, we're back to
Found-
Cooper Communities because they own that shopping center, as they own the other one where JJ's and Gasano's is located. I have asked the question, and they have simply said restaurants, which they have said before in other areas, which haven't materialized, unfortunately. Although we do have Cafe USA, that's a new one. I guess it's a couple of years old now. And I'm hearing that they may expand. So obviously business is good for them, which is great. But no, the answer at the moment is restaurants, which we need. We certainly need more diversity.
Well, I think we could go on for a long time here. And I think this is a beautiful way to expand the mayor's rap.
I agree.
And follow you on down to your next path. So tell all your friends.
Yes.
Spread the word that you heard facts today, not something somebody made up on Facebook. And invite them to, that they have the same opportunity. So help us here. Okay?
Yeah, and I applaud you. Thank you very much for coming in.
All right, folks. Well, look at our beautiful audience. Whoops.
Oh, the audience disappeared.
There they are. Look at them. Yay. Thank you guys very, very much. All right. So thank you. We went over a little bit today, but I think it was very worthwhile, and I appreciate you as always.
Thank you.
I knew that even without a script today, we wouldn't have any trouble filling it up. So, all right, Bella Vista, thank you. We will see you next month for the Mayor's Rap. Take care.
Bye-bye.